Hi, this is Heather Groom, and welcome back to High on Utah. I've got my favorite guest, that's what I've always been calling him, with me again today. So, Brent's here, my husband, to talk about his heart attack now that we are about 5 weeks out.
Mhm.
I had mentioned in the first podcast that I wanted to do a second episode on kind of things we've learned, kind of a deeper dive. And now that we're a few weeks out from it, we have some things to share. So thanks for joining us today. We're just going to kick off right away. And I think most people now know who you are and
Yeah,
that you had a heart attack. So, yes,
it's a
we're going
little
to go from
surreal
there.
still. Like, hopefully, this doesn't bring back PTSD, but we'll see.
It does, actually, for me. Yes, and for you.
A little bit.
So here's what we're going to talk about today. And I probably am going to have to put on my glasses because I did take a few notes here, and Brent also has a few notes. So
Hmm.
I think many people, first of all, I think they do not understand heart disease. I don't like that word either, heart disease. I think it's just understanding heart function, what causes a heart attack, everything around. I mean, who would want to talk about heart disease? Because it sounds like really scary and like a disease, right? But it is something that everyone faces. I mean, we've got our heart always pumping blood, and you got to be aware of what's going on with it. Some of the stats we've learned even lately have been really interesting. Like, what was the stat you were telling me about? There's more people that die from a heart disease
Hmm.
and related issues than all cancers combined.
That's right.
So that's pretty crazy, really, when you think about that. But a lot of times they call it the silent killer just because people don't really talk about it, and also it just can come on really quickly. So let's see what we're going to talk about. So I think let's dive in. Maybe we're going to talk about what surprised you the most, maybe what surprised
Hmm.
me the most, some of the kind of things we're still dealing with right now and what people can actually do right now to take care of themselves and make sure that they are not in this situation.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So let's do that. One of the thoughts as we go through this is I've become more aware of my body and things that are going on, and also more interested in the things that a doctor says. And maybe in the past, I've thought of it as like the Charlie Brown talking head. They say some numbers, and I'm like, I don't know what that number means, and don't dive deep on it. But I think now I've recognized and over the years that, hey, it's my body. When the doctor says a number, he may not remember that number, and it's important for me to know exactly what that number means. Do I want to lower it? Like, what do I actually want to do about the number? And they may prescribe medication, and I think it's the job of as a patient to understand, how does this medication, how is it going to affect me? Look at it the next day, the next week, the next month. How has it changed how I feel? There's a lot of factors to it. The doctors, they just give a number, 80 milligrams or whatever it is, and maybe don't consider your weight or your age.
Yeah.
Um,
So you kind of there's a lot of
so there's
things
a lot
that
of things that I
to
think
adjust
as a
there.
patient, I've taken a little more ownership of what I hear and what I want to do. Like, I've had two different doctors give me two different answers. And so now it's up to me to decide, okay, which one do I want to go with?
Yeah. And I would say the other thing is, like for me, something that's hit me is, a lot of times you go into the, doctor's office, they take your blood pressure every time. It's just a really quick thing. And a lot of times they'll tell me, oh, it's high. And then they kind of walk away. And I don't know if I ever really kind of connected that that was completely damaging my heart.
Hmm.
So I've even recently gone on some blood pressure medicine. I used to have low blood pressure. The other thing that's interesting is I used to have really low blood pressure, always under 120 over 80. And then the last few years, for some reason, it's just kind of spiked and gone up. And I didn't really think much about it because I don't know. I just was like, they would just say, oh, it's high, and then kind of walk away, or, oh, we need to be aware of that.
Hmm.
But now I'm starting to realize, okay, there's actual damage that's been done to my heart because of that. So we're kind of in that right now
Yeah,
and
we'll use
looking
that
into
as a
things.
quick little plug. We definitely don't get any royalties for this. And also, the, everything we talk about is not medical advice, right? We're
Yeah, we're
just
not doctors,
giving our
lawyers.
opinions
Yes,
as
exactly.
individuals. But this book has been really helpful for me. The Blood Pressure Blueprint by Ellie Campbell. And she talks about not just blood pressure, like Heather just mentioned, like, measuring blood pressure, like how you sit, talking or not. Like there are all these different pieces, having your back against the back of the chair, that change the reading by 10 points or so, for each little one. So, but then we'll come back to this book in a little bit, but I did want to touch on it briefly, that um, it's a very good read, that's helped me
Yes, Brent's
understand
been
things.
carrying it around the house and everywhere we
Absolutely.
go, and he's been quoting it all the time. So I feel like I've read it directly, even though I really haven't yet. But let's talk about even what actually causes a heart attack, because I think that's something that we've also learned
hmm
from everything, like the actual what happened.
Yep. So we can think of it like, maybe like a highway. You've got, blood flowing through, a car's flowing through, and there is hard plaque and soft plaque. And the hard plaque is pretty static. It's like part of the pavement. Soft plaque would be maybe water or ice, that's on the top. Um, and what happens, it's kind of like this soft plaque builds up, and at some point through the one of the blood vessels, maybe think of it like a pimple. It kind of pops, or ruptures, and the body sees that as, just like a regular pimple on your face, or a cut on your hand, and it sees it as a sore, and the body sends platelets to clot that area. And so that's what actually happens. Like, it's not like, I'd always thought that, oh, you get plaque buildup and it slowly builds and builds, and then all of a sudden there's so much that it just blocks. But what actually happens is the soft plaque, at some point, it could be 30, 50, 60%, blocked, but at some point it ruptures, and then the body sends platelets, which are the clotting mechanism, and then the clot itself is what
It's
blocks
and what's what
and
kills you
gives you,
usually.
yeah, it stops the heart from beating or starts to die. So that's the risk.
It just prevents it from beating, basically,
Yeah.
right?
hmm
So, which yeah, that was interesting to me as well. Like when we learned that as well. So
So then what they did once that happened in my case, they went in through my wrist right here, and first went in with like a camera and looked at where exactly was blocked, and then once they saw that, then they went in with a stent. And what a stent is, it's basically like a tiny little straw that's already scrolled up, and they push it in, and then once it gets to the right spot, they release it so it expands out. That's what a stent is, and it's some kind of metallic material, or I don't know exactly. Um, and so that has to stay there forever. It can't come out again. It just expands that vessel and keeps the flow going in that area.
yeah, good. Well, so that was all interesting things that we've learned. So then let's also talk about preventative testing. So one of the things that leading up to this, we had a calcium score test. So maybe you can talk a
hmm
little bit more about that.
Yeah, there's multiple tests. So there's blood work tests, so you can measure what cholesterol levels are, and that's an indicator of how much soft plaque may be in your body. Then there's a CAT scan that I did. It's called the calcium score test, and that goes in and measures the four major vessels in your heart and gives a score for each one. And that tells you, how much hard plaque, is in that area. And my score was,
It was pretty
I
high.
think it was like two in the upper 200s. 400 is when you start to get worried. But then doctors take that number and they combine it with like how you feel when you exercise. So do you have chest pain when you exercise? Are you short of breath, more, faster than you normally were? Some of these are harder to notice because it, you know, it's a slower buildup. So you may be shorter of breath than you were 2 years ago, but you're comparing it to last week. You're like, well, it hasn't changed in a week. So that's where it's a little bit difficult for an individual to truly measure. Hey, do I have less, blood flow? Do I have more shortness of breath? Or is it just because I'm tired?
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors.
And just to kind of jump in, like there are people that if they have a calcium score of even under 100, they still are having heart
Hmm.
surgery. So it just
Yeah.
kind of depends on the individual. Like when Brent's came back really high, we were concerned. I mean, we were
Yep.
concerned about
Hmm.
that. And we eventually had some things to work through on that. But yours was still high. I mean, it's
Hmm.
definitely like when you say 400, like that's like emergency, like you better get to the hospital like right now, but even at the score you had, it is still really concerning. So,
Yep. So
it's
then the
it's
next test,
concerning kind of all of those.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the next test that it's typically done is a stress test where they have you walk on a treadmill and then monitor your heart, and they pump you with, some kind of drugs to elevate your heart speed, as if you're walking at different speeds. And then they can measure and they have an EKG going at the same time. Um, I never got to that. That was
You guys,
scheduled for, um, yeah,
yeah,
May
for
12th at 8:30, and I had gotten out of surgery at about 7 or so
so literally he had that test scheduled for
the same day.
the same day, like an hour later. So, but maybe talk about the ApoB because I'm not even sure for me. I mean, I feel like we're both kind of diving into
Hmm.
this. But maybe explain what that ApoB is as well, like for understanding like cholesterol. And I
Yeah.
think that that's important.
Yeah, this is something I'm still learning myself, but there are different types of cholesterol. There's HDL and there's LDL. Those are the two that we hear about. But then there are also 5 subtypes underneath each of those. And HDL is helping. That's kind of how I remember it. It helps remove cholesterol from your body. And the LDL is what doctors typically consider as bad cholesterol. But there are, like I said, there's 5 subtypes. Some of those are health, healthy as well. The ApoB, that's a measurement of some of this cholesterol. And if that number is low, is what you want to see. Um, that's the measurement that indicates how much soft plaque can be building up in your system. So if you have a high number, then the soft plaque has an opportunity to grow and I guess sit. So you want that number to be low, and that's one of the indicators that doctors are looking at very frequently now is the ApoB score, and you have to ask for that if you get a standard blood test, blood work. That's not typically done, so you have to ask for that specifically.
Okay, so yeah, back to that because that's what we're also learning about, kind of the good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. And I think a lot of people think that when we talk about like calcium buildup, for example, that it's just, the hard calcium, but there's also kind of this soft plaque, and that can be problematic as well. And so that's why it's interesting and it's important to do the calcium score test and the ApoB, right? And
Mhm.
I'm hopefully saying that
The
right.
ApoB is an indicator of the soft plaque potential.
Yes.
Yep.
And so that's important to know. What just also a hack that we're learning right now, and we're going to get to some other hacks. But we're both going to be creating, we're already starting a little medical binder. Maybe it's our
Mm.
age. I don't know. But I'm like, I know other people that have these, and it's like they're this thick, and hopefully we don't have them that thick yet. Right. But I do think it is interesting. One of the things that we're learning is just we have to be in charge of our own healthcare,
Mhm.
and if we're not proactive, nobody else is going to be.
Yeah.
And so I think it is a good reminder just that you really need to take charge of your health, like make sure you have copies of everything. And a lot of times, I think doctors mean well, they just get really busy. And they say, "Oh, we'll pull it out of your file or whatever." Well, if it's really hard for them, they're not going to do it, or it gets delayed, and we've seen that happen a few times. Or things just get lost in the shuffle. So now I think it's good to have the apps on your phone so you can see your own results, but then also print them. I mean, maybe we're super old school this way, but I think printing them and having them at different doctors when you see them, if you have it right in front of you, then they can take a copy
I
of
think
it.
that's helpful, especially for like for the two of us. So, Heather may have notes somewhere on her phone.
Yes.
And if we're in the doctor and, they're asking me questions, for example, may not know where that is on our phone, right? It's and vice versa. That's probably a better example. I have it on my phone somewhere in a great place for me. She has no idea where that is. And so, in this case, I wasn't really conversing with the doctors. And so Heather couldn't have answered, some of these questions.
And I think kind of
So a
on
notebook
that,
is helpful in that case.
for sure. And I think one thing, and I don't know, maybe we'll jump into a few hacks right now that I think are important. And I think kind of learning lessons. As soon as I got to the hospital with him, and he wasn't really in any place to be, I mean, he couldn't really think or talk or anything much. One of the first questions is they asked what medications he was on. And I mean, I was like, blood pressure medicine. I didn't know the name. I didn't know. They were
Hmm.
like, what's the dosage? How many times a day does he take it? I mean, and I think in that moment, I actually realized that there were a lot of things I didn't know the answer to. And I realized there were things they were going to ask me that I had no clue about. And that was one of them. And so one of the things I think is important is I actually took his bottles of medication the other day and just put them on a counter and took a picture of it just so that I can see it so that if anything happened again, I'd have that photo and I'd be able to know what milligrams he was on and what the dosages are because the instructions are right on it. So, and I put it in my favorites for photos so that way I could like access it really quickly. But I would say right now, like if you don't know what your, significant other, spouse, whatever, or people, even family members
Hmm.
that you might be in charge of, if you've got to know those medications because sometimes they can have adverse reactions and it impacts what they do for them in the hospital. And so I think that was one of my scariest kind of moments was realizing that I really wasn't sure, I was like, "Well, I know they put him on something recently, and I know they changed the brand because that's the other thing is sometimes they change the amount or the type or whatever." So, it's important to know those things and have those or even somewhere in the notes section on your phone, but have that information. So, that's one of the
Yeah.
things I would
Yeah,
say
that's
right
where a
now.
notebook's really helpful. And then medications definitely important. The doctors are going to ask that, but sometimes supplements that you may be taking
Mhm.
could have a bearing as well. And doctors may want to know about some supplements that you're on. So it's good to know
Yeah, for sure.
all things.
For sure. And we'll get back to more hacks in a minute. I feel
Hmm.
like we're like every few minutes, hey, here's a hack. So that's one of the things I think that's important to know. So, kind of jumping over to actually, let's talk about one of the things they think actually saved your life, which was breath work.
Okay.
So, I kind of want to talk about that because I've had a few people now ask me about that because we referenced it in our other previous podcast together.
Hmm.
And I think it's good just to kind of explain what that was. And
Hmm.
I never thought about it as saving a life, really, like you think about it for relaxation and meditation. But maybe give us like the history on
Okay.
on that.
Yeah. Let's see. The history goes back about 3 years,
It's
probably,
actually more than that.
maybe more than
It's like
three.
three and a half, maybe four.
Yeah. Yeah. We were, I was thinking about, and heard about breathing and then
Like breath work, yeah.
breath work, thinking about breathing. Yeah.
Yeah, like we
It's
all
funny.
breathe.
We all breathe, but it's pretty fascinating how
That's a
deep
deep dive maybe for
rabbit hole we can
another.
go
We'll
down.
we'll actually do a
No,
podcast, I
I'm
think.
going to talk about it a little bit
Yeah.
here.
But
So,
we'll even do another one
a
too.
good friend, Rich, he talked to me, we were walking, on a trip and started talking about breath work. And he gave me some insights on it and then talked about an app, called Other Ship. And
It's
so,
OTHERSHIP,
yep,
just so you know.
that's right. And there's another app called Expand by the Monroe Institute, but I've used the Other Ship
And
one quite a
Calm.
bit.
I have Calm, I
Calm is a good
think.
one too. Um, but what's fascinating about these is that we all breathe every day, but there's so much more to it than I ever realized. Um, and it helped. I started learning about it and then installed the app and started just practicing. They have like over 100 different types of ways to breathe, and so I would just get familiar with, try one a day and see what it was like. And I just looked at the app this morning. Over the last 3 years or so, I've done like 800 different sessions, with their different sessions that they have. And so one example is, just the basic, like we think we know how to breathe. Um, like the perfect breath is considered the 5 second breath. And so it's 5 seconds in, you start at the lower belly and then go in the middle and then fill all the way up to the top and then go out for five. So it's a very slow 5 in, 5 out. And what's been fascinating to me is doing these different types of breathing. You can breathe in and then hold, breathe out and hold. That's called box breathing. And all these different styles have different purposes and can quickly change your thoughts, your emotions, switch you from, between states of parasympathetic to sympathetic, and help us relax and get out of the fight or flight mode very quickly. This, I'll reference the book, Blood Pressure Blueprint. One of the examples, this lady that wrote it, Ellie Campbell, she is very interested in, naturopath ideas. And so she had a client that came in that was typically had really good blood pressure. The lady was going through some things at work and some animals that had died and was just kind of spun up a little bit. And so Dr. Campbell sat down with the lady and they just practiced breathing for 5 minutes. They took the blood pressure before and it was high, took the blood pressure after doing simple breathing, and she was in the normal range. And so, that's an example, not needing medication, just kind of practicing and learning some tools to lower
Yeah, like
breath.
situational. Yep.
Mhm.
And like you said, I think we'll end up doing some more podcasts on this,
Yeah.
but maybe just your history even. Like you
Hmm.
started doing this like about 3.5 years
Yeah.
ago, probably maybe
Yeah.
4 years
And it
ago.
helped me
Yeah.
through, the time when I got laid off from Microsoft. There was a lot of anxiety and stress at that time. And I would do, sometimes an hour, there were 1 hour sessions, take into deep relaxation states and reset emotions, and reset mindset.
And I still like if you do
And
get that one that's called Othership, there's one that's called Blissed Out on
hmm.
it. And I still, if I'm ever like
Hmm.
traveling, because you know, when you travel, you sometimes just can't sleep in a hotel.
Hmm.
And I just can't like relax a lot of times, or if I'm at, somebody else's house or whatever, I'll listen to that one. I think it's like 6 minutes, maybe.
It's
It's not
super
even, it's
short.
pretty
Uh-huh.
short.
Yep.
But almost always I'm like asleep by the end. Like
Yeah.
it just like knocks me out and I sleep really well with it. So it really does work. It's got like
Hmm.
binaural beats and some other things. So,
Hmm.
but that's interesting. But how we're going to talk about how that possibly helps save your life right now. So
Hmm.
basically, when you thought you may be having a heart attack, and we
Hmm.
were at the house, um, and you were getting into the
Hmm.
car, you were already starting to really slow down your breath. And then when we got into the car, I remember I was kind of breathing with you and just like, I was like, okay, just like slow down your breath and maybe talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, since I've been doing and practicing breath work and was comfortable getting into meditative states, that's kind of what I thought about. And it's almost like you actually don't think about it. You just kind of just start to let your body
You like
to
drop
do it,
into
and you
it.
just drop into it. And so I started counting and really thinking about how long I was breathing in, how long I was breathing out. And then I really stopped thinking about counting, even because counting sometimes prevents from dropping in. So just let the body knows how to breathe, and just kind of having my mind relax and let my body do what it knew to do. Um, and I ended up, having really, really, I went into a very deep meditative state going to the hospital. And while I was there, um, and I'm sure that slowed down my heart rate quite a bit. It got me out of being anxious or scared, and helped me really relax
Yeah.
and be
I mean, there
calm.
were times where I meant when we were in the hospital, like I was checking to see if he was breathing because he was breathing so slow and just really in this meditative state that
Mhm.
it was like I was waiting for him to exhale a few times. Like I was like watching him and getting a little nervous, but then I knew what he was doing. And so I was like, okay, I think we're good here. And he had all the monitors on him and everything. But breath work really has been transformational. I mean, in so many ways. So that's why we probably need to do more episodes on it in the future, but that has really changed our lives.
Hmm.
Just even sometimes now when I'm, nervous or I have a lot going on or I'm just stressed, learning certain just easy techniques like, the box breathing and just kind of relaxing. And I would say just even you could look on YouTube or Instagram for some of those things. But
Yeah.
but it really is, it's very helpful. I mean, it also can wake you up, like if you're just feeling really drowsy.
Yeah.
So anyway, but we'll talk
I mean,
about that
that's,
in the future.
I mean,
But
there's, yeah, hundreds of hours of sessions on other ship, and there's all kinds of different types of breathing and, purposes for the breathing.
yeah.
I mean, that's what's fascinating as I've kind of gone through this book and thought about different things in life. Um, we may hear about breath work and then go on with our day, but people spend their entire life, going really, really deep on some of these topics. And so, you know, we may pass it by and
Yeah.
go on with our day and realize, oh, maybe that would be helpful. And then there's many people that have gone down the rabbit hole of that thing that we just heard in passing. And we can go as deep as we want as well.
Yeah. So that's been really interesting. But I
Hmm.
think that what's such a cool kind of thing is that, when you learned it, it was kind of out of stress, like a stressful
Hmm.
situation, but then how it's benefited you later,
Yeah.
literally
Yeah.
saved your life. So
Hmm.
I think that's just something really fascinating. But let's talk about really quick lifestyle and prevention. I mean, and we can kind of go through these others pretty quick, but overall, there's also a huge genetic component. As I mentioned in the first podcast, like my grandfather died before 40 from this exact heart attack. And so my dad was just young. I think he was like 3 or 4 years old when his dad had died. And his brothers have died, kind of the same heart attack. There's a familial gene that also runs as well. Now, of course, lifestyle is important too. So maybe talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, we all have heard these things like lifestyle, weight loss, our diet, exercise. This blood pressure blueprint book, like she has, a couple hundred pages, but then there's one page where she said, actually, um, if you exercise, 45 minutes a day or, whatever the number was for 4 days a week, that has the largest impact on health of anything else,
Just the walking,
just
right?
of that, of anything else in the book. And so these are things that the medical profession, they typically don't talk about, even though they have massive impacts. You often go to the doctor and they'll say, "Oh, take this pill," and then it may or may not help. A lot of times it does, but there's so much more to our own lifestyle changes that would make a difference, and we often we don't get guidance on that. It would be nice to be able to go deep on some of them, like exercise or diet, with your PCP, but they I mean, honestly, they don't have time, and so they go with what's in their toolbox, which is the medications. So I think it's up to us to really to do the other things.
Yeah, like right now we've been trying to swim, like because
That's a
it's
good one.
summer. I have to throw this one out there because this is clearly my exercise of choice. But
Hmm.
I love swimming, so like a lot of times we'll go at least once or twice a day. And right now you've been walking,
Yeah,
like just even walking. There's so much on that's. I mean, if you even just did 20 minutes a day of walking, that would be a
yeah.
huge
No, I was kind of
impact.
fascinated when I went to cardio rehab. They would take my blood pressure before exercise, and then they'd put me on a treadmill, take my blood pressure during the exercise, and then they take my blood pressure after, 5 minutes after. And I had no idea how these things really worked before. And I always thought, well, my blood pressure is going to be high when I'm exercising because my heart's beating fast. Um, but what actually happened, my blood pressure came down during the exercise. And then after the exercise, it was actually down lower. Um, and so that was kind of fascinating to watch and learn how that worked.
Yeah.
There's different numbers like, weight loss has, you can kind of tie it to how many blood pressure points it'll drop. Exercise, how many blood pressure points it'll drop. And then there are many natural methods as well, like flaxseed, just ground flaxseed can lower your blood pressure they've said by up to 10 points by taking 2 tablespoons a day. And, this book has 2 pages or more of all these different natural pieces like nanokinase, CoQ10. There are lots of natural things that can be done. And then she's tied studies to it to show how much blood pressure can be reduced by doing each of these different, natural options. And so that's in addition to or as an alternative to blood pressure medication. And why is blood pressure important? Because I think higher blood pressure can help, or can cause, help is the wrong word,
Yeah.
can cause that rupture in the vessel if there's soft plaque there. And so that's one reason I keep blood pressure down. We can maybe talk about the medications really quick too.
Yeah. Let's just actually go move to that.
So there's blood pressure medications. There's lots of different types of those. There are statins. Statins are used to kind of control that cholesterol and to lower it. They target, like the statins target the HDL and kind of prevent that creation of the bad plaque. There's another one, Repatha, which is another, it also impacts, it helps your liver create more of the good, removing the cholesterol. So there's lots of different things on that front. There are, let's see, antiplatelets. That's very important for the stent healing because we're going to have to make sure that there's no clotting on the stent as it heals. And they say that takes 3 months to a year for the skin to grow back over top of the stent. And then you can kind of back off of the antiplatelets.
Like the blood thinners, basically. Yeah.
Blood thinners are different. Yes.
Okay.
I don't know the difference exactly between blood thinners and antiplatelets.
And I don't know.
Antiplatelets. They both cause similar things. Like if you got a cut, you're going to bleed for a lot longer.
I'm learning something.
On blood thinners and antiplatelets, but they actually do have different purposes. So for the stent,
good to know.
The stent, it's not a blood thinner like Eliquis.
Okay.
It's actually prasugrel and aspirin. Those are antiplatelets.
But you're actually on blood thinners and
I'm not on blood thinners. No,
oh,
I'm only on
see what I
prasugrel, which is the antiplatelet, and aspirin, which is also an antiplatelet.
Oh, okay. Good. I did not know this. So
I know.
I'm even learning here.
We're learning these things all the time.
Okay. Well, this is good information because I guess I never really thought about that, like what the difference is. So, okay. So, yes. So now you're on some medications. You're still doing breath work. You're walking. You're swimming a lot of times. So, yes. And you're feeling good overall. I'd say there's kind of some just things that we haven't expected as far as I wanted to talk about other things to be aware of, but we'll get to that in a second. But also just kind of side effects or like these soft kind of, things that we weren't expecting,
Yeah, there was the eye. I had some vision things going on in the hospital, like double vision, and went to some amazing eye doctors that did tests, and then I have some simple exercises like just take a pencil. So I see double sometimes when my focus comes in, and so I just hold the pencil and have to exercise my eyes to get the eraser to touch my nose. Very simple thing at the end, but
it's huge impact.
It's a huge impact, and it's based on scientific research. But it's just an eraser.
You've got a little cough right now too. Not to out you, but
I do. I don't know if that's
they're not really sure what.
I don't know if that's because of the smoke outside or allergies going right now, or maybe a side effect from some of the medications that dry me out more and cause more.
I know
mucus.
some people say that they have a cough after heart type surgeries, and so like right now you've got kind of this like clearing of throat.
That is an interesting thing to talk about. Like the doctors and the pharmacists will tell you what the side effects are, from the clinical trials, which would be, like headaches or diarrhea or whatever it is. But I don't think I've ever had someone say that there's like, hey, taking this statin will lower this, chemical in your body. So you need to take this supplement to offset it. So one example, like the statins that I'm on, lower CoQ10, which is one of the core things needed for your molecules and your your body to replicate cells. And so I'm on that supplement based on naturopath research and doctors that I've talked to. So that's another whole rabbit hole to go down, and it's also at odds maybe a little bit with the medical professions. I talked to one doctor and he said, "Oh, there's no supplements that you need," but I don't. Based on my own research, I feel like I do.
Yeah,
So,
and I think we're just trying to kind of live a healthy
mhm.
lifestyle and everything as well right now. So we're kind of still in that. I
Yeah,
I don't I
it's
think we're going to be in that the
forever
rest of our
learning.
lives,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
I get asked a lot of times like what we would do differently and maybe some of the things like maybe while somebody's having a heart attack. So I thought maybe we would
yeah.
kind of touch on a few things.
Mm,
Like one of the things I think we would have done differently is um, you know, he got in my car really quick. We're only 5 minutes from the hospital. But I didn't really think to call 911. This is something we'd talked about, and I think it probably still would have been a good idea for me to call 911, even if we were on the way to the hospital.
mhm.
I think having somebody on the phone with us and just knowing that we're on the way to the hospital,
Yeah,
having
I
it
mean, at that point,
prepared and ready.
every minute matters at that point. And so when we got to the hospital, we pulled right up to the ER doors, but then it still took probably 3 minutes before I was in the chair and headed back to the room.
At least that, because I had to run
And then they
in,
had to prep
grab
the room more.
somebody.
And so I think if we'd called 911 on the way to the hospital, and told them what was happening, they would have been ready for us, both in the room and also to meet us at the door. Um, you know, some people say, well, you should not have gotten in that car. Like you should have just waited for the ambulance. And that was our personal call
I think it was just
at
a
the
personal
time.
call because at the time, I don't know if we knew what we were. Yeah, and I can't say whether or not that was good or bad. But I mean, I was like, we're driving,
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think that I would call 911. And at the time, we actually did talk about going down to Provo, which is, like a 25-minute away because the hospital near us is a small hospital. And so I'm actually glad we didn't do that, because I don't know what would have happened. So I do think it's important to call 911, if they can get to your house fast enough, or if you're en route already, I would call 911. Either way, just call 911 is the bottom line. And don't go to the furthest hospital way, because even though you ended up in Provo at that hospital and they did the surgery there,
Hmm.
they took you by ambulance, but they were able to get you, kind of like they were giving you blood thinners and things to help kind of get you somewhat, I don't want to say stabilized, but um, that way they could transport you. But they were in control then, kind of
Yeah.
at that point. So I think that was probably one of the biggest takeaways. The other thing that I've learned, because especially on the caregiver side, um, well, there's a few things, but another one was I remember I wanted to get a hold of your boss to tell them and say, hey, I don't know if Brent's, because I don't know his work schedule exactly. So I didn't know if he was missing a meeting. I didn't know what was going on. So I opened his phone. I know his password and everything, but he has all of his work contacts in Slack, like a work channel. And I didn't know that. And so I'm looking through his contacts trying to find the name of his boss, and I couldn't find it. And so that was pretty stressful. I tracked down, I can't remember how I did it, but I found somebody else's
You
phone
figured out
number and
Slack. I said
email.
use
Did I?
Slack.
Did I do
You
that?
did.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad when I actually know a little
Yeah.
technology of something. I don't know, but yeah. So I ended up tracking down one of his coworkers and sent her a message, and then
Hmm.
I sent your boss a message too.
Hmm.
And it when I got both of their phone numbers, but it took me a minute. But I would say it's good for you to, somebody else to know how to get a hold of your work, whether it's your boss, whether it's, and I knew your boss actually was at the time he was over in Norway on a trip too, I
Hmm.
think. So it was hard because I didn't know. I was like, oh, I better get a hold of somebody else because I think he's out of town right now. And it was, maybe it's hour wise, maybe it's different. So I would say you've got to know some of those phone numbers and contact information
Maybe
for
what another
your
one
caregivers.
been interesting to go through now is the bills start coming in. Is how the medical system works a little bit. So, you always hear about being in network or out of network. What's really helpful with our plan, probably most plans are this way. If it's an emergency, you get to the closest hospital, and they treat that as in network. Whereas if you just, driven um, to that hospital just off the street with not an emergency and gotten care, they would treat it as out of network. But since it's an emergency, then it's in network, and then any transfers, even though they got transferred to something that's classically out of network, it's still treated as in network because it was part of that chain of emergency. So that's
Yeah, and
been good to
good
learn.
to know your caps as well,
Hmm.
because as you start getting these bills for hundreds of thousands of dollars, literally, it's kind of stressful. That was kind of stressful just to
Yeah.
have all these bills come in the mail, and you're like, where do I start? What do I pay? What? Because it's not just like a simple copay. It's like this.
Hmm.
Some of them needed to be rerun or rebuild because we were in what's considered an out of network hospital. So it was good to just reanalyze that plan, and you could even throw your plan into chat gpt and have it summarize some of the things for you, but just to actually know, okay, there is an individual cap and there's a family cap. And that was actually like, that was a huge relief for me, because at first we're thinking, how much of this are we going to owe? So it was nice to know that there actually are, kind of those
Hmm.
protections there.
Yeah.
So that was good as well. What other key takeaways do we have?
I think the biggest one is, it's at least with heart disease, it's a long-term process. And so the sooner you can start thinking about it and making lifestyle changes, the better. The other takeaway really that's important for me is to realize that, I'm in charge of my own health, and I need to listen to what doctors say, do my own research as well, um, and talk to different professionals. I'm really interested in naturopath options. So I'll bring this book out again.
Brent's like gonna show
Here we
you this
go.
book.
But
He like
literally,
when I say he loves this book, like I mean he
I
really,
really do. I mean,
really
there's one
loves this
page
book.
she talks about how you should sit when you're getting your blood pressure taken, and the different, I mentioned this, the different numbers, how it will change if you're sitting the wrong way or doing things. But then, like with breath work, she talks about that for, just one or
Just
two
show it.
pages,
Show this
right?
again. We're
She
gonna do
talks
a
about
little
it
promo
for one or
here.
two pages, but she just touches on it to get you introduced to it. And she does that with lots of different modalities. Like she talks about EMDR, and then just talks about moving the eyes, left to right to kind of reset your emotions. And each one of these is based in science. She talks about the science, but she only touches on things very briefly on each page of the book. But then you could go in, and people have spent lifetimes
Did you wish you would have had
expanding
this
out this
had
book.
like if you like right
I love
now,
it.
this is a great
This
preventative,
is a great
right?
Bible book. It's not just for blood pressure, but it's a really good intro to all naturopath options that are out there. Um, and you can read through it quickly and then go as deep as you want on any one of the topics.
Good. Well, I would say the other key takeaway is to this calcium score test and the
Hmm.
ApoB scores. I
Yeah,
think right now insurance companies for the most part are not paying for those. You basically just make an appointment
for the calcium
for the
score.
calcium
Hmm.
score, and is the ApoB one
That's just a
too?
blood work,
Oh,
so
it is.
they pay for that.
Okay, so they
Hmm.
pay for that one, but
Hmm.
it's the calcium score that they don't. And
Hmm.
I would just recommend, it's like anywhere from 50 to $100 at your hospital to go pay, and just get even a baseline, so that that way kind of what your score is and where you're at, and
Hmm.
then repeat as necessary, and take
Yeah.
it to your doctor, because that's kind of one of the things that we had done a test on that, and when his number came back, we were talking to our doctors about that.
Hmm.
So I think that that's a really important one, because people just don't know about that test. When I've talked to a lot of people, like our friends, they've said, "What do we didn't even know about that." And so I think that is really something that you should do, and do that, like I said, even often, depending on what that number comes back at, and then talk to your doctor about that. Let's see. And I would just say, I would say the other one of the key takeaways is just we're trying to be better about not. It's funny even as I say this, but not being so stressed, even though this morning was fairly stressful, right? So we're trying to manage that because I think we don't realize what a toll that stress is taking on our body. So I think just getting out, and even if you're just walking 20 minutes a day, right? Like we've talked about this, or swimming or whatever,
Mhm.
just moving your body is so important every single day. Like, I mean, you think of our ancestors, and that's what they did. They walked.
Yeah.
They did a lot of exercise that we don't really do in our society these days. And so it's important. I don't think, you don't need to be a bodybuilder or Arnold Schwarzenegger type or anything, but it's just good to move. So, and just to manage your stress. I think that that's important. Anything else?
No, well, we didn't touch on when a major life event like this happens, there are other I mean, I wouldn't call it side effects, but there are other things that happen,
Yeah, I'd love, like,
right?
yes, let's talk about that for
So we'll
1
talk
minute.
about that for a minute. So, like, my perspective on life has been shifting over the last several years with some, pretty significant personal changes in my life. Um, and I've used life differently over the last 3 years. And then having this event, um, I guess, escalated that or even turned the page again. And so I see things, differently than I had. It's kind of like just, I don't know, perspective changes. And
And there's a mental, I guess, even maybe let's touch on that a little more, because
yeah,
I think that's the other thing is I don't think I realized, like, there's a little PTSD,
there's definitely
we kind of joke
PTSD
around about it, but
for
it's
sure.
for real. That, and
Hmm.
I want to be clear too, it also happens to the caregiver.
Yeah.
Because I think that was really stressful on me, and I'm not trying to make this about me. It's just I don't think I realized how much of an impact that would have, because even
Hmm.
as Brent started to go on these walks just by himself sometimes, I was like having anxiety just because I was like checking the find my on my phone and just making sure that he's, okay. But you just, you this happens so fast and in an instant. And there's a lot to unwind, I
Hmm.
think, after.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Late at night or just during the day, you know, you just think, wow, that what could have happened or what if? And there's a little sometimes anxiety and um, just unknown, right? And realize, but then also, I've come to realize how, yes, life is very fragile, but the moments that we have with each other are important. Who we spend it with, is important. Like, an example is work. Like, we're with the people we work with for hours and hours a day, and we chose to be where we're at. They chose to be where they're at, and work together for a reason.
Like your
And
work
so
family,
it's your work family,
literally.
literally, yeah. And so I've cherished that more and really thought about who I work with, and appreciate those relationships more deeply. And then, with Heather and family and friends, when I'm with people, I really view it differently and enjoy the time that I'm with people.
Yeah, just even kind of enjoying the now. I think too often
Mhm.
we are too stressed about what's happening next, like in the future or past. And, I mean, we talk about enjoying the present or being present in the moment, but I think it's taken on a new meaning for us, at least,
Mhm.
because it's made us really, cherish that, and even time with our family, like you said, people we work with, relationships we have. I think it's just made us so grateful. And I know, even for me, and I could get emotional probably talking about this, but just the number of people, it was actually kind of overwhelming, but just people that reached out. And
Mhm.
after this happened, I posted something on social media, and I was even just, really touched by all the offers and people that, offered to bring us food, or just, brought flowers or wanted to visit, or, you know, um, just offer advice, or we have a good friend and she brought us some healthy living products, and just I just felt so much gratitude and so much
Hmm.
support
Absolutely.
and love, and that was really meaningful. And then we kind of talked about this even in our first podcast, but we basically just gave each other, I remember, when you were in the hospital, I said, whatever emotions we feel for the next 30 days, and I'm going to extend out to now like 60 to 90 days. I said, we're okay. There were just moments where sometimes I think it just hit us differently and in different ways that maybe you're not expecting. And so you
Hmm.
just know that when you're processing something like that, give yourself some grace and give your partner some
Yeah.
grace, because it's what they are thinking, what they're feeling. Because, like, for me, I was thinking, because right now, like, we're building a house, and I mean, all of these things were flashing through my brain, or like, am I going to be by myself, or am I, I own a business, and what does that look like? And, it's, during that time, and then even after, you realize there's a caregiving role, so like I'm trying to prepare food that's healthier, I'm trying to do grocery shopping, and there's an added level of, I don't know if it's stress, but it's just awareness. And it's important to just kind of recognize those emotions. And sometimes we've even joked with each other, and, just about sometimes we'll feel it at the just most bizarre times. Like,
Hmm.
I can't remember what was happening. It was like when you were thinking about, I think, Sophia coming home, and you were like, I maybe wouldn't have seen Sophia coming home because she was, over in China at school, and the heart attack happened before she got home. And so it's like just things like that that you kind of realize, and you almost need to process it. So I can now see why people go to therapy over things like this, just because it's a lot to deal with, and just realizing, as you're making these changes, just having that support system in place as well. So just know that people love and support you, and and I think sometimes we don't express that enough. I'm trying to be better about that as well, even just with friends. Like, we saw some friends down in St. George recently, and we were just like, we love you, just because, like, we love and miss them. And I think it's a good reminder to just live like you today, how that you don't, I don't want to say regrets, but just so that it's in a meaningful way. And I think being more aware of others, I think this has also made me kind of more aware of others, and maybe their health concerns and their challenges, whether it's, with their heart or something else.
Right.
you
Definitely.
know
Yeah, definitely.
do you have anything else to
No, I
add
think
on
you
that?
did a great job. No, wonderful. I mean, I think that sums it up really well.
Yeah. Well, good.
Hmm.
Well, we hope this episode was really helpful today.
Hmm.
Thanks for being our friends, by the
Thank
way,
you.
too.
Yes.
And thanks for listening. And I'm like, this has been good discussion today, because now I think there's some other
Mm.
things that we'll talk about in future episodes besides real estate. We
Yeah.
love real estate too. But it's also just, it's important to remember your health, and that life is good. Is life good now?
Life is excellent.
Yes,
Yes.
life is excellent, and we're just thankful for every day. So thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.